the state of New South Wales is not out of the woods yet when it comes to those enormous rainfall totals that we've seen over the last 24 hours and that wild weather that, as you said, formed two tornadoes in regional New South Wales. But we've seen about 850 call-outs by the SES over the last 24 hours, including a number of flood rescues as well here in the Sydney metropolitan area. But turning back to yesterday, some of that remarkable footage, particularly coming out of Young in southwest New South Wales, where footage shows what can best be described as a tornado. In fact, it actually inspired a tornado warning at about 3:30 p.m. yesterday in Young, and we've seen some pretty remarkable footage from the scene there. Thankfully, there were no injuries or any serious damage reported, but we've also seen a number of other major incidents across New South Wales that were sparked by yesterday's big rainfall totals. Of course, that heavy wind was also playing a major factor. We saw what was described as quite a serious explosion at the Port Kembla steelworks south of Sydney yesterday at about 4 p.m. We understand from the managers of that steelworks that heavy rain essentially created what they've described as a steam explosion that could be heard up to 20 kilometres away, just to give you an idea of how loud that explosion was. Thankfully, no reported injuries there. But here in Sydney, we've also seen quite a serious response from the SES to those really big rainfall and heavy wind totals that we've seen over the last 24 hours. In fact, 2 women had to be rescued by SES crews after a roof collapse last night under that heavy rain in Leppington in Sydney's west. And we've also seen a number of other incidents. Now, the major warnings that were running all the way from the south coast of New South Wales up to metropolitan Sydney have been downgraded in the last few hours by the Bureau of Meteorology. However, there are still minor flood warnings in place for the Georges River in Sydney's southwest, particularly around the suburb of Liverpool. And we've heard from not only the Bureau but the SES as well that they'll be monitoring conditions throughout the day. And just to end on, James, we also saw quite a remarkable rescue, is a good way of putting it, in Bexley in Sydney south overnight. We had a man who made his way out into the street, braving the weather, in order to what can best be described as saving a fish from a storm drain. But the SES is still warning people across the state that we aren't out of the woods yet. There are still some pretty serious totals expected to hover over Sydney in particular, South Sydney, throughout the next 24 hours. So plenty more to come.